Did he know his department was using social media to target his constituents only?
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, I've clearly answered the point which his colleague raised, and if he has specific suggestions that the very clear rules under which the government operates has been breached, then I would like to hear them. But, Mr. Speaker, it's very clear, for example, that the Scottish Government target specific audiences, and if he is saying that they do not, I will be very surprised to hear that.
Brendan O'Hara.
We've been told that the Scotland Office published numerous Facebook posts to coincide with government visits, but it appears only the posts relating to his constituency received a financial boost. If this is the case, and the Scotland Office is seen to be micro-targeting tailored Facebook adverts only to voters in his constituency, does he consider this a misuse of taxpayers' money and an abuse of power?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman does have a track record of asking questions that he doesn't know what the answer is going to be given. And I return very clearly to the point that if there are specific suggestions that the code with which the government operates under have been breached, then they should be made and taken forward in the proper way. But if the honourable gentleman is suggesting that the Scottish Government doesn't target specific individuals with their material, then he is misleading this House.
Well, if he were suggesting it, he would be, but he isn't, so he isn't. I'm sure that the SNP aren't accusing the Secretary of State of impropriety, as that would be the wrong thing to do on the floor of the chamber, but equally I'm sure the Secretary of State isn't making any accusation of impropriety. I'm grateful for the nod of the head from a sedentary position. Mr Douglas Ross.
Speaker, Cambridge Analytica claimed yesterday that the SNP's involvement with them was far more than Nicola Sturgeon has previously claimed. Does my right honourable friend agree that the SNP should be far more open and honest about their involvement with Cambridge Analytica, particularly with their own MPs?
Mr. Speaker, I might well agree, but as I'm sure you would tell me, I'm not responsible for the SNP.
Indeed. Mr Gavin Foster.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Did my right honourable friend share my interest in the answers provided to the member for Argyll and Bute by Cambridge Analytica yesterday, or in the recent hearing? And would he agree that it's important that separatists are equally open about how they've used these consultancies?
Mr. Speaker, what I agree, and this is not necessarily the forum, is that the SNP have a very great many questions to answer about their involvement with Cambridge Analytica, and perhaps Mr. Peter Murrell, when he deigns to speak to the MP group, will answer some of them for them.
Sweeney.
Mr. Speaker, it's rather ironic that the SNP submitted this question en masse, given their subsequent unwillingness to offer basic transparency over their party's dealings with Cambridge Analytica. But I hope today that the Secretary of State can be more transparent than the SNP have been. While his government decimates public services, his department spent around £50,000 in targeted social media. So can he tell us what data the Scotland Office gathered on the public and whether he believes this was an appropriate use of taxpayers' money?
The Scotland Office didn't gather data on the public. We used established methods of effectively advertising on Facebook. And if the honourable gentleman pays attention to some of the debates and discussions in this House, he will know that many people now gain information through social media. So in terms of the Scotland Office fulfilling its obligation to the people of Scotland about what this government is doing and what the Scotland Office is doing, social media is a perfectly appropriate channel to do it through.
Dr Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Home Office cap on Tier 2...
Number 6.
Sorry, number 6, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, with permission, I will answer questions 6, 8 and 13 together. I have regular discussions with the Prime Minister and Cabinet colleagues. The UK is committed to securing a deal that works for all parts of the UK, including Scotland.
Dr Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The Home Office cap on Tier 2 visas has been reached for each of the last 4 months, meaning that applications are now prioritised on the salary offered, and that salary has therefore risen from £30,000 to £55,000. This means that the majority of such visas are likely to end up in high-income areas like London, with companies in Scotland and indeed the NHS unable to simply double the salary to get a visa. So does the Secretary of State not accept that Scotland needs its own immigration system so we can recruit high-skilled professionals for our industries and our NHS?
Mr. Speaker, I don't accept that Scotland needs its own immigration system, and it was very clear at the time of the Smith Commission agreement that immigration would not be devolved. However, I will look into the specific issue that the honourable lady has raised.
C. MacDonald.
Mr. Speaker, his government has repeatedly talked the talk about a partnership of equals. So can he explain where on earth is the equity and where is the partnership in proposals that the Westminster Parliament can restrict the Scottish Parliament's powers for up to 7 years without any question of consent?
Mr. Speaker, as I made clear in my earlier response, the UK Government is committed to working with the Scottish Government, but we're not just partners. What the honourable member and his colleagues cannot accept is Scotland is part of the United Kingdom, and that is the nature of the agreement that we have reached, which the Welsh Government say protects the devolution settlement.
Angela Crawley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Countless times the SNP have asked the Secretary of State whether amendments to Clause 11 would be tabled to protect devolution, and time again he promised us they would. The Scottish Government has drafted amendments and provided proposals, all of which have been ignored by the Westminster Government. Isn't this just another broken Tory promise to Scotland?
I'm sure that question looked better written down than it sounded when it's been absolutely clear that the Welsh Government, who Mike Russell only last week was saying was fully aligned with the Scottish Government's purpose and requirement, have made absolutely clear that the amendment that we are lodging to the EU withdrawal bill protects the devolution settlement.
All Masterton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. East Renfrewshire has a vibrant business community, but only 75 of those businesses have more than 20 employees. By far their most important market is the rest of the United Kingdom. What reassurances can my right honourable friend give them that as the UK leaves the EU they will have seamless access to the rest of the UK?
Mr. Speaker, of course, the whole debate around Clause 11 of the EU withdrawal bill has arisen because of the importance of retaining that UK market to businesses in Scotland, Wales and indeed Northern Ireland. That's why we place so much importance on getting it right, and I believe the amendment that we've brought forward does just that.
Bill Grant. Now, the honourable gentleman was bobbing previously. Does he want to get in?
Since been answered, Mr.
That's a very unusual. The honourable gentleman's in danger of setting a new precedent against repetition in the House of Commons. It's an isolated case. I'm grateful to the honourable member. Oh, very well. Yes, Asima Malhotra.
Hi, John. Hi, Joe.
Two-thirds of the UK's jobs in financial and professional services are outside London, many in Scotland. Reuters estimate 5,000 jobs in financial services may be moved by Brexit. What advice has the Secretary of State been given about how this could affect jobs in Scotland?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable lady is right, and it's very, very important that everyone is clear that financial services is not just the City of London. It is hugely important in Scotland and indeed the other constituent parts of the United Kingdom, and that's why we're fighting for a good deal from the EU for financial services.
Number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We want our future relationship with the EU to be a deep and special partnership, taking in both economic and security cooperation. We are confident that this is in the interest of both sides, so we approach these negotiations anticipating success. We do not want nor expect a no-deal outcome.
Jude Killen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In its year-end report, the Fraser of Allender Institute pointed to uncertainty over Brexit as one of the principal drags on the Scottish economy. The people of Scotland are fed up of the ongoing pantomime that is the relationship between the Scottish Tories and the SNP. Can the Secretary of State tell us what meetings he has had with the Scottish Scottish Government on Clause 11, and how does he intend to bring this farce to a close?
Well, I think my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, has made it very clear that we want the Scottish Government to agree to the Clause 11 amendment that the Welsh Government have done. The Welsh Government have accepted, the UK Government have gone a long way, and I hope that the Scottish Government are listening and will take part.
Will suffice. Christine Jardine.
Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the most important thing for mitigating the disastrous effects of Brexit in Scotland would be an agreement between the two governments, and can he encourage the Scottish Government to stop constitutional posturing and think about what the people actually want?
I absolutely do agree with the Honourable Lady. She makes a very important point. The Welsh Government have accepted that this is a sensible way forward. It's time that Scotland did exactly the same.
And Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Universal credit is transforming lives across the country. Research shows that universal credit claimants spend more time searching for work and applying for work than those on the previous benefits. There are now over 100,000 fewer workless households in Scotland than 7 years ago.
The Trussell Trust report that there's been a 17% increase in food bank usage in Scotland last year. Could that be linked in any way to universal credit?
Well, I think it's widely accepted that there are many reasons why people use food banks, and there are many different issues. Even the all-party group on food poverty here accepted that. We have made sure that we've rolled out universal credit slowly and made changes where we think that they have been necessary, and we continue to do so.
Briefly, Patricia Gibson.
Mr. Speaker, given that the Secretary of State...
Number 12, well done.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the Honourable Lady will join me in welcoming the commitment that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, made that when she visited Ayr, that the UK Government is opening talks to deliver such a deal.
Patricia Gibson.
Mr. Speaker, given that the Secretary of State has told me in the floor of this House that he shares my frustration at the lack of progress on this deal, and given now that the Prime Minister has publicly admitted to it, will he finally, at long last, for the love of God, give us a timetable?
Mr. Speaker, I think somewhere in there was a note of positivity from the Honourable Lady about the fact that the UK Government has committed to take forward the Ayrshire Growth Deal. We're working closely with the local authorities and other partners on a timetable.
The timing of the Honourable Member for Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock could be improved, as I tried to call him a few moments ago. But I'm in a generous mood. Let's hear the fella. Bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the city and growth deals that cover the vast majority of Scotland are a great example of what can be achieved when governments and authorities work closely together as opposed to picking a fight with one another?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and I would also say this, Mr. Speaker, it's his disposition, it's his bonhomie that takes deals and arrangements forward rather than the negativity and hostility of some.
Order. Questions to the Prime Minister. Gavin Robinson.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole House will wish to join me in offering our warmest congratulations to their Royal Highnesses, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, on the birth of their son earlier this week. Mr. Speaker, I know members across the House will want to join me in marking Stephen Lawrence's death 25 years ago. For each of those years, the Lawrence family have fought heroically to ensure that their son's life and death will never be forgotten. And as I announced earlier this week, the Government will work with the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust to establish a national annual commemoration of Stephen's life and legacy. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Gavin Robinson.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of my right honourable colleagues and honourable colleagues, can we acknowledge the fortitude of the Lawrence family and indeed the joy that this nation shares on a royal birth. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, through the Confidence and Supply Agreement, the Prime Minister not only recognised the need to give Northern Ireland an economic boost, She agreed a package of measures including a Belfast Region City Deal, a City Deal for others and ultra-fast broadband investment that will transform our part of this United Kingdom. In responding to the eager anticipation of our communities and in reaffirming her commitment, will she ensure sufficient progress is made to advance both in time for the autumn budget?
Well, can I say to the honourable gentleman that has raised an important issue. He's absolutely right. The government has set out several public commitments, including in the Confidence and Supply Agreement, to work towards a comprehensive and ambitious set of city deals across Northern Ireland. There is progress being made, which I welcome, by the Belfast City Region partners in developing the city deal proposals. I look forward to their submission, which will be considered obviously by the government. Of course, in the absence of an executive, there are some issues to work through. But can I assure the honourable gentleman that my right honourable friend, the Northern Ireland Secretary, is committed to working positively with partners in the UK Government, the Belfast City Region and the Northern Ireland Civil Service to progress the city deal.
Andrew Bowie.
Earlier than expected, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. Yesterday, the Welsh Government reached an agreement with Her Majesty's Government on the withdrawal bill. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that it's in the interest of Scottish business and the Scottish people that the Scottish National Party leadership should do the same and reach a similar agreement as soon as possible?
Can I say to my honourable friend that I am pleased that we're making progress with regard to the withdrawal bill. I think that's been acknowledged by all sides, and after many months of negotiation, and I'd like to pay tribute to my right honourable friends, particularly the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, for the work he has done in those negotiations. But after many months, we have reached agreement with the Welsh Government. It's a significant achievement. It will provide legal certainty, increase the powers of the devolved governments and respect the devolution settlements. We've made considerable changes to the bill to reflect issues raised by members and by the devolved administrations. It is indeed disappointing that the Scottish Government have not yet felt able to add their agreement to the new amendments, and we sincerely hope that they will reconsider their position.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join the Prime Minister in congratulating the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge on the birth of their baby, and I wish them well. I think we should also reflect that Doreen and Neville Lawrence fought for years to get justice for the death of their son. The Macpherson inquiry showed that institutional racism was a major factor in the inquiry. We need to drive out institutional racism in all its forms, wherever it raises its head within our society. Mr. Speaker, we recognise that the Home Secretary has rightly apologised to the Windrush generation and made a commitment to compensate people for the hardship they've endured. The government is committed to compensation in theory, but as yet nothing in practice. There's an understandable lack of trust by the Windrush generation. So can the Prime Minister today be clear and confirm that those British citizens who've worked, paid taxes here for decades, wrongly denied pensions and benefits will be fully compensated?
Can I first of all say to the right honourable gentleman, it is absolutely right that across this House we should all be absolutely clear in our determination to ensure that we stamp out racism in every form. Let me set out the House the action that has been taken, because my right honourable friend did make very clear the offering the other day in her statement before the House that those who came here before the 1st of January 73 from Commonwealth countries, this is from Commonwealth countries as a whole, will be offered citizenship status without paying the fee, without taking the knowledge of language and life in the UK test, and the children of that generation, the Windrush generation who are in the UK, will in most cases be British citizens already, but they will also be, where that's not the case, they'll be able to apply to naturalise at no further cost. We're also taking action in relation to those who made their life here but retired to their country of origin and have found it difficult or impossible to return to the UK, and will work with High Commissions to make sure they can easily access the offer of formal British citizenship, because the Windrush generation are British. They are part of us. and there will be a compensation scheme, which my right honourable friend will set the details of that compensation scheme out in due course. But I think everybody will see that the action the government has taken is because we know these Windrush generation. Oh, the Labour front bench shake their heads and go, oh no. The Windrush generation are British, they are part of us, and we will ensure that.
Jeremy Corbyn! Mr. Speaker, it's not an act of generosity to waive citizenship fees when they're British citizens already, and they should be granted full status immediately. Mr. Speaker, 4 years ago, an internal Home Office memo stated that her hostile environment policies could make it harder for people like the Windrush generation to find homes and, in its own words, provoke discrimination. Why did the Home Secretary ignore that memo?
The right honourable gentleman talks about a hostile environment. What we are proposing here will, I think, flush illegal migrants out. We are trying to create a much more hostile environment in this country if you are here illegally. Those are not my words. They are the words of the Right Honourable Member for Birmingham Hodge Hill when he was Labour Immigration Minister. And the Labour leader ought to know about this because the Right Honourable Gentleman sits on his front bench.
Jeremy Corbyn! Speaker, what I'm talking about is the Windrush generation of people who came here completely legally. The Prime Minister herself was warned by my friend, the member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, who's now the Shadow Home Secretary, directly about these policies in 2014. And when that Act was going through Parliament, the then Community Secretary, Eric Pickles, wrote to her warning the costs and risks considerably outweigh the benefits. Why did she ignore his advice as well as the request from my honourable friend?
I say to the right honourable gentleman, in relation to the Windrush generation, we have made absolutely clear that the Windrush generation, those people who came here from the Commonwealth before the 1st of January 1973, have a right to be here. They are British, they are part of us. The problem at the time was that they were not documented with that right, and that is what we are now putting right. He talks about action that the government has taken in relation to those who are here illegally. The Windrush generation are here legally. Action against those who are here illegally has been taken by successive governments. Checks on someone's right to work here came in 1997. Measures on access to benefits in 1999. Civil penalties for employing illegal migrants in 2008, both under a Labour government. And why have these actions been taken? Because people up and down this country want to ensure that the government is taking action on those people who are here illegally. It is not fair to those people who work hard, who have a right to be here, who've contributed to this country, if they see people who are here illegally being given the same access to rights and services.
Jeremy Corbyn! Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister seems to want to get away from the injustice done to the Windrush generation. The Equalities and Human Rights Commission warned about the 2016 Immigration Act, saying the bill is likely to lead to destitution and may cause inhuman and degrading treatment in breach of Article 3 of the European Convention of Human Rights. They've quite rightly apologised for the scandalous way in which British citizens have been treated, but it was due to the 2014 and 16 Immigration Acts. So will the Prime Minister now commit to reviewing that legislation to make sure this never happens again?
As I set out for the House last week, this is a generation who came here prior to 1973. The Labour front bench say we know this, but the questions that the Right Honourable Gentleman is asking suggest that they're ignoring some of the facts in relation to this. This is a generation who came here prior to 1973. We are not ignoring the problems that some members of this generation are facing. That is why my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has set out a special team in the Home Office to deal with their inquiries, not just deal with their inquiries, but actively help them to find the documentation to clarify their status. That is why we have made the offer that my right honourable friend made of ensuring we can give them formal British citizenship, which recognises that they are British, but does so in a formal, documented way. The problem was that back prior to 1973, when the Windrush generation came here, they were not given documents that set out their status. We are now putting that right, and we will leave no stone unturned to put that right.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Speaker, in 2013, the then Home Secretary said it was about creating a really hostile environment, and that's why she was introducing the legislation. Had the Windrush generation not mounted the campaign that they have, had members on this side of the House not raised the matter persistently, there would be no compensation, there would be no review, there would be no apology. But, Mr. Speaker, any review of legislation needs to be wider than just immigration law. The dismantling of legal aid provision in 2012 made the impact of the 2014 Immigration Act harder to challenge. These policies swept up British citizens and legal migrants, causing them immense suffering, as she was warned. So can the Prime Minister send a clear message today and tell us the hostile environment is over, and that her bogus immigration targets that have driven this hostile culture will be scrapped? The Windrush generation have served this country and deserve better than this.
The Windrush generation are British. They have contributed to this country. They have made their life here. Dealing with those people who are here illegally, not the Windrush generation, they are here legally. There are people who are in this country illegally. And I say to the right honourable gentleman again, I've quoted the right honourable member for Birmingham Hodge Hill when he was Labour's immigration minister. The Leader of the Opposition referred to 2013. In 2013, the then Shadow Home Secretary, the right honourable member for Normanton, Pontefract and Castleford, said, "We need much stronger action from government to bring illegal immigration down." That is, well, the Labour front bench are saying the Windrush generation are not illegal. They are not illegal. They are here legally. That is why we are providing the support to enable them to get the documents for their status. What we are talking about, what the right honourable gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, is talking about, is whether or not we should deal with illegal immigration. And up and down this country, the British public will tell him we should deal with illegal immigration.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, we're talking about the environment created by her as Home Secretary for 6 years when she knew full well of the problems the Windrush generation were facing. At last, she's been forced to act upon it. Last week, the current Home Secretary admitted the Home Office sometimes loses sight of the individual. Yet we now know that when she took over from a predecessor, her intent was to harden this cruel and misdirected policy, pledging to do so ruthlessly. A report last month by immigration officials stated the hostile environment measures were not even having the desired effect. The current Home Secretary inherited a failing policy and made it worse. Isn't it time she took responsibility and resigned?
The House must calm itself. We've got a long way to go and a lot of backbenchers' questions to reach. Let's hear the Prime Minister.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that up and down this country, people want to ensure that the government is taking action against those people who are here in this country illegally, because it isn't fair that people who work hard day in and day out, who contribute to this country, who put into the life of this country, are seeing people who are here illegally accessing services in the same way. We are acting to ensure that those people who are here legally are given the support that they need. We welcomed the Windrush generation those many years ago. They are British, they are part of us, and we are ensuring that they remain here and are able to continue to live their lives here. But it is also right that this government takes action against those people who are accessing services despite being here illegally and not putting in and not contributing to this country. And I say to the right honourable gentleman, if he wants to talk about issues of fairness, if he wants to talk about a government that is kind, then let's just look and see what a Labour government would be like. Because a Labour government that would wreck our economy, that would damage people's jobs, that would destroy, that would tax people and end up with debt for future generations, is not a Labour government that is kind or fair to anybody.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the whole House will want to pass on its condolences to the family of Matt Campbell, who sadly died taking part in the London Marathon. But will the Prime Minister join me in congratulating the 40,000 runners, including many right honourable and honourable members from this place, who completed the marathon, raising huge amounts of money for local charities and good causes across the United Kingdom. And in particular, we should thank the volunteers, the medics and the ambulance staff who made the event as safe as possible.
Gentlemen, he shouldn't be too shy about it. The Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, may I join my honourable friend in paying tribute to Matt Campbell, and I understand his Just Giving page has now raised over £140,000 for the Brathay Trust, which works to inspire vulnerable young people to make positive changes in their lives. I'm sure members across the House will want to join me in offering condolences to his family and friends. But I'm also happy to join my honourable friend in congratulating the runners in this weekend's London Marathon, including those 15 members from this House who competed, and, if I may say so, particularly my honourable friend who was the fastest Member of Parliament in the marathon, completing it, because we should have it on record, in 3 hours and 38 minutes. Many congratulations to my honourable friend. But it's also right that we pay tribute to those ambulance workers and medical staff who, for all that they did on the day to enable this to take place.
Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I, on behalf of those of us on these benches, pass on congratulations to the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge on the birth of the son, and I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister and Stephen Lawrence. Mr. Speaker, the CBI, the NFU, the Scottish Government, the Welsh Government, the House of Lords and overwhelming members of this House want the UK to remain in the Customs Union. Why is the Prime Minister on the side of her cynical Brexiteers, frontbenchers and not working in the interests of all the nations of the United Kingdom?
The British people voted to leave the European Union. In voting to leave the European Union, they voted to leave the single market and the customs union. What we want to ensure is that we as a country are able to independently negotiate free trade deals around the rest of the world. That we are also able to ensure that we deliver on our commitment for no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and that we have as frictionless a border as possible between the United Kingdom and the European Union. What businesses tell me is that they want that tariff-free, frictionless border, and that's what we're negotiating for them.
Blackford. Mr. Speaker, that answer simply isn't good enough. The single market and the customs union, quite simply, were not on the ballot paper. The Prime Minister's own government analysis shows almost every sector of the economy and every region of the United Kingdom would be negatively impacted if the UK leaves the customs union. Negotiations in Brussels are effectively at a standstill because the government are bereft of ideas on how to deal with the Irish border issue. Why is it that jobs, living standards, even the Good Friday Agreement are all secondary concerns to this government? Will the Prime Minister confirm now that if this place votes in favour of a customs union, that will be the negotiating position of her government?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that he is wrong in so many of the statements that he's just made? First of all, this government is not bereft of ideas in terms of how we can approach the issue of the Northern Ireland border, because we have published proposals for dealing with that very issue. But if he wants to listen to Scottish businesses, I suggest he listens to those businesses who just yesterday from the Food and Drink Federation, Scottish Bakers, Scottish Retail Consortium, said Scotland's businesses benefit enormously from the existing and largely unfettered UK single market. The SNP government in Scotland should listen to that.
Dr. Andrew Murison.
At Thursday's recovery meeting in Salisbury, the public was told that 9 Novichok hotspots remain in the city and around the city, and that the clean-up may take until the end of the year. In thanking the Prime Minister for her very close interest in this matter, can I ask what more can be done to expedite the clean-up so that life in South Wiltshire can return to normal as soon as possible?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend, because he has raised an important issue, and I'm very happy to update the House on this issue. And first of all, can I make it absolutely clear that Public Health England have said Salisbury is safe for residents and visitors. There's no need for anyone to take any additional precautions. Cordons are in place to protect the public while decontamination work is carried out on the sites that my honourable friend has referred to. And after decontamination is undertaken at each site, sampling will be carried out to ensure that the sites are safe to be released back to the public. But I can assure my honourable friend that the need to expedite this work is well recognised, but we want, of course, to ensure that it is done in a way that those sites will in the future be available to the public and will be safe for the public.
Neil Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Around 20 of my constituents, mostly living around Hart Hill, and 4,000 other low-paid workers around the UK are waiting for money that is rightfully theirs. They have been waiting 20 years. Some will have died waiting, and others are now seriously ill. And you, Mr. Speaker, represent, and as do other members across this House, represent constituents waiting for their payout from the Roadchef Employee Benefit Trust, which has been trying to get HMRC to take a decision on £10 million wrongly paid to them 18 years ago. Will the Prime Minister join me today in calling on HMRC to finally decide on this case and get the money back to the people who rightly deserve it?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that I understand he raised this case with my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, last week. My honourable friend, the Financial Secretary, has offered to meet him to discuss the wider issue. HMRC is working closely with the trustees' representatives to resolve the case and will be meeting them next month. HMRC is operationally independent, and I think that is important. They must, of course, apply the law fairly, collect the taxes set out in legislation by Parliament, but they are working with the trustees' representatives, and as I said, my honourable friend, the Financial Secretary, is happy to meet the honourable gentleman to discuss this.
Richard Drax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I commend my right honourable friend for reaffirming the government's clear position that we will not be remaining in any form of a customs union? And while on the EU, can she reassure fishermen in South Dorset and fishermen around the country, especially the under 10-metre fleet, that they will not be disadvantaged by any incoming EU policies during the implementation period?
I say to my honourable friend, obviously this question of fisheries is a matter that he and others have raised previously. And can I reassure him that during the implementation period we've negotiated that the UK's share of catch cannot be reduced. I think it safeguards the livelihoods of our fishing communities and importantly also delivers a smooth and orderly Brexit. There's also an obligation in the agreement on both sides to act in good faith and throughout that implementation period, and any attempts by the EU to harm the UK fishing industry would obviously breach that obligation. But obviously in December 2020, we'll be negotiating fishing opportunities as a third country, as a fully independent coastal state, deciding who can have access to our waters on what terms for the first time in over 40 years.
Douglas Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, you will be aware that in my constituency we are putting the finishing touches to our second aircraft carrier, the Prince of Wales. But as we near the end of that contract, over 400 people in the Rosyth Yard are now facing redundancy, with many more job losses in the pipeline. Will the Prime Minister visit Dunfermline and West Fife to explain to the Rosyth workforce face-to-face why her government intends to award a £1 billion shipbuilding contract to yards out with these islands when we have the skills, the talent and the infrastructure to deliver right here? Prime Minister.
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that what we are doing through our national shipbuilding strategy is focusing on giving the Royal Navy the ships it needs while increasing economic growth across the country and investing in a more skilled workforce. So we are encouraging a more competitive industry in shipbuilding and growing jobs across the country. I think he may have been referring to the future ships, support ships for the Royal Fleet Auxiliary being procured through international competition. That's 3 ships. They'll be built in the Fleet Solid Support Programme. They will be subject to international competition to secure the best possible value for money for the UK taxpayer. But what we are doing through our national shipbuilding strategy is ensuring that we develop that shipbuilding capability here in the UK in a way that we can encourage all UK shipyards with the necessary skills and expertise to continue to engage in that particular programme.
Is my right honourable friend aware that according to the World Health Organization, the second largest medical system in the world with 300,000 doctors treating 200 million patients every year is homeopathy? That's the evidence. That's the evidence. Will my right honourable friend congratulate the...
Order! This is very discourteous. I want to hear the views of the honourable gentleman on this matter.
Will she congratulate the doctors who are members of the Faculty of Homeopathy on their work in the health service, and particularly dealing with cases that are too difficult to treat conventionally? And does she agree with me that homeopathic vets should be able to make their own minds up about whether they use homeopathy on its own or other treatments as well?
Can I say to my honourable friend, he has been a long-standing advocate in this House for homeopathy. And obviously some patients who are treated in the NHS and in the private sector are users of complementary and alternative therapies. But it is the responsibility of the local NHS to make decisions on the commissioning and funding of healthcare treatments and to take account of issues around safety, clinical and cost effectiveness and the availability of suitably qualified and regulated practitioners. And I think for all the issues that he's addressed, it is right that those who are professionally able to make these judgments are left to make those judgments.
Is McInnes?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency of Hayward and Middleton, in the borough of Rochdale, 1 in 3 of Year 6 children are overweight or obese. And with our children being bombarded with junk food ads on their favourite television programmes, on billboards and even on bus tickets, will the Prime Minister take the bold steps needed to tackle junk food marketing and support Jamie Oliver's latest campaign and say that she too has had enough?
Can I say to the honourable lady, we already have plans to tackle childhood obesity that are world leading. No other developed country has done anything as ambitious. Our soft drinks industry levy, that's bold action that we're taking. Our sugar reduction programme is going to cut the amounts of sugar consumed by young people. And of course we're putting in plans in relation to the amount of exercise that primary school children get every day, physical activity that they get every day. Those steps will make a real difference and a real help in reversing a problem that has been decades in the making. But of course we haven't ruled out further action if the right results aren't seen.
Rhys Villiers.
Does the Prime Minister agree
that events since the very powerful debate on anti-Semitism that we held in this chamber have demonstrated that Labour are still not taking this problem seriously, and now they need to take urgent action to root out this form of racism from their party.
Can I say to my right honourable friend that, of course, she raises an extremely important issue. As I said right at the very beginning in response to the right honourable gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, it is important that everybody across this House takes action to stamp out racism in all its forms, and I include in that anti-Semitism.
Alison Thewlis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I see the results of the Prime Minister's hostile environment in my casework every single day. My constituents, Mr. Sheikh and Ms Gould, applied for leave to remain on the same day, the 27th of March 2017. He was granted, but she was refused on the 28th of March, a full year later. The couple's 5-year-old and their 4-month-old are both British citizens, but Mrs Gould has been told she should be ready to leave the UK. Shame. Why does the Prime Minister want to separate this family, and will she intervene?
Can I say to the honourable lady, as she knows full well, that those who are working in the UK visas and immigration section of the Home Office look at every case very carefully, but she's made her point in this House, and I'm sure that the Home Office will look again at this case.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The City of London has recently topped the worldwide Z-Yen index, and it supports 450,000 jobs and is worth £45 billion to the UK economy. Would my right honourable friend agree that it is essential for both the EU and the UK that the final Brexit agreement supports these financial services, otherwise they will simply move elsewhere in the world?
Can I say to my honourable friend that this is an important issue? I referred to this in my Mansion House speech, where I said that we wanted to ensure that financial services were a part of the deep and comprehensive partnership we want to build with the EU27. Our goal should be establishing access to each other's markets. That should be based on maintaining the same regulatory outcomes over time, with a mechanism that determines proportionate consequences where they are not maintained. That's part of my ambition for an economic partnership with the European Union that goes way beyond any existing free trade agreement, covering more sectors and cooperating more fully. And my honourable friend is right that actually if firms are looking in financial services are looking to go elsewhere, they are more likely to look to go elsewhere in the world rather than elsewhere in Europe.
Colleen Fletcher.
A stem cell transplant can be a life-saving treatment for people with blood cancer. Recent research shows that having a younger stem cell donor improves a patient's chance of surviving post-transplant. Will the Prime Minister join me in supporting the upcoming Be a Lifesaver campaign by the charity Anthony Nolan, which aims to recruit more young people aged 16 to 30 to the stem cell donor register? And will she congratulate the 1,000 people in Coventry North East and all others who are already signed up to be donors?
Well, I'm happy to join her in congratulating those people in Coventry and elsewhere who have signed up already to be donors. Anthony Nolan has done excellent work over many years. I wasn't aware of the particular campaign that she has referred to, but I will certainly look into it. Sounds like a very good campaign, and I'm sure she will be encouraging other members of this House to support it as well.
Pawsey.
Mr. Speaker, increasing numbers of children of school age are now being educated at home. Does the Prime Minister agree that it's important to ensure that these children receive an education that's appropriate for their needs?
Yes. Can I say to my honourable friend, I think this is very important. Sometimes parents will decide to educate their children at home. They will have their reasons for wishing to do so, but it's important that those children do get an appropriate quality and level of education, and I can reassure my honourable friend that I know that this is an issue that the Secretary of State for Education is looking at.
Lucy Powell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On Saturday, I met a lovely young couple who had all but given up hope of ever being able to buy their own home. But thanks to an innovative, genuinely affordable housing scheme by Manchester City Council, they had just moved into their own house right near the university. So will she join me in praising Manchester Labour, who, despite her government's planning and funding restrictions have built many hundreds of truly affordable homes in my constituency, and we'll have another 2,000 coming on stream very soon.
Well, I'm happy to say to the Honourable Lady that I think it is important that we are providing homes and building more homes for people, and within that we include affordable homes too. And I'm pleased to say that since we came in 2010, we've delivered more affordable homes in the last 7 years than the last 7 years of the last Labour government. But I'm happy it is in fact the government is working with Manchester and with the Mayor of Manchester and the Combined Authority to ensure that we are supporting in certain areas with funding and encouraging that building of affordable homes, and indeed ensuring that there are those homes that young people can aspire so that they can get their foot on that property ladder for those who never thought they'd be able to do so.
Andrea Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bruncliffe Academy in Morley recently scored outstanding during the Ofsted inspection, and Newlands Academy, also in Morley, scored good for the very first time in its history. Can the Prime Minister confirm to the House that under this Conservative government, since 2010, an additional 1.8 million children are now taught in good and outstanding schools? And I hope the Prime Minister will join me in congratulating the principals, teachers, staff and students at the two schools for their hard work to obtain this admirable achievement.
Well, can I say to my honourable friend, I'm very happy to join her in congratulating the teachers and heads and all the staff of the two schools that she has mentioned in the achievements that they have got as a result of the work that they have been doing. She asked me to confirm that there are now 1.8 million more children in good or outstanding schools. I'm afraid I'm not able to confirm that, because in fact there are now 1.9 million more children in good or outstanding schools.
And Carden!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Anthony, who lives with a chronic disabling illness, has worked all his life until finishing on medical grounds 3 years ago. Since 2002, he's received disability living allowance, but last year was transferred to PIP and his mobility allowance was cut. Yesterday, Anthony handed back his mobility vehicle he's had for 16 years. And today, he is housebound and fearful for his future. The total injustice of the system means that he now faces a 9-month wait for his appeal at Liverpool Tribunal Services. What message does the Prime Minister have for Anthony as he adjusts to his new life as a prisoner in his own home?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, I'm sorry to hear of the case that he has raised. Obviously, as all members of this House will know, there are cases where people have had to appeal against judgments that have been made in relation to these. But I will ensure that the Department of Work and Pensions is aware of the particular case that he has raised in this House.
Will Quince.
Speaker. In October last year, the National Bereavement Care Pathway was launched in 11 pilot sites. Last week, it launched in a further 21 hospital sites. And yesterday, I'm delighted to announce that the government has set aside funding for a national rollout of the National Bereavement Care Pathway. Will my right honourable friend join me in welcoming this funding, which will make such a difference to bereaved parents up and down this country?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend, this is a subject which he has championed and campaigned on, and with great personal commitment to this. And I recognise the importance, and that's why the government is putting the funding in, of providing this bereavement counselling and supporting parents who are in those most difficult circumstances where they've a child.
Sir Vincent Cable.
The Prime Minister will be aware of the concern that if the Home Office cannot deal humanely and efficiently with the immigration status of 50,000 UK residents of Caribbean origin, they will seriously struggle to deal efficiently and humanely with 3 million European national registration. Can she address the particular concern that under the Data Protection Bill, the Home Office is now taking powers to cover up future mistakes by blocking access to individual files sought by individuals and their lawyers to check the accuracy of their data?
The interpretation that the right honourable gentleman has put on that is not correct, in that it will be possible for people to access information that they need to have available. What I would say to him, he's referred to the issue about EU citizens. There is a real difference between a situation where people came to this country but were not given documented status in this country, and that is the issue that we're dealing with the Windrush generation. They've contributed to this country, they've lived here, but at no stage, when they came here, they were not given that documentary evidence. There's a difference with the system we're putting in place for EU citizens, where EU citizens are being encouraged and asked to apply for that settled status so that they have the evidence of their status. We are making sure that this is a problem. The problem will not occur in relation to EU citizens.
Ben Bradley.
Speaker, this week we've been talking about higher education in this place. Does my right honourable friend agree that the action we're taking as a government shows that a Conservative government is committed to delivering for students, working with them and treating them as adults, in stark contrast with members opposite, who look to win votes from young people by offering illogical and undeliverable free stuff?
Well, can I say to my honourable friend, he's absolutely right. First of all, the review we're bringing in on tertiary education is about ensuring not just that the funding and financing of tertiary education is right, but also that young people have access to the routes through education, be it technical or university, that suits their particular needs. And of course, last year, the right honourable gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, said that he would deal with student debt. Students thought he was going to abolish student debt. What happens after the election? He goes back on his promise.
Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was not going to raise this, but the Prime Minister quoted me. Let me say to the Prime Minister, do not try to hide behind me or the Labour Party when she was warned repeatedly of the damage her obsession with her net migration target was doing. Do not try to hide behind the Cabinet when they don't agree with you on this and are trying to clear up the mess. And do not try to hide behind civil servants. Yes.
Order. I'm not having the questioner interrupted. It will be heard, and it will be heard in full. And that's the end of it. Yvette Cooper.
Do not try to hide behind civil servants when she set the policies, instilled in them the culture of disbelief. And when the High Commissioners told us this morning that they had warned the Foreign Office about the Windrush generation immigration problems in 2016, what did she do? Because a few years ago the Prime Minister said, I'm actually sick and tired of a government minister who simply blames other people when something goes wrong. What's changed?
Can I say to the right honourable lady, nobody is trying to blame anybody else. The question of the Windrush generation arises from the fact that when they came here, they were not documented. Their status to live here was not documented. Over the years, yes, there have been individual cases over the years of people who have had to regularise their documentation and have done so. We have now seen cases of people in difficulty because they have not been able to do that. That is why the Home Office is taking action to deal with that. But for governments of every colour, including the government in which the Right Honourable Lady served, action has been taken against illegal immigrants. This does not apply to the Windrush generation. They are here, they are British, they have a right to be here. But under Labour, action was taken for a compliant environment. Under the Conservatives, action has been taken to deal with illegal immigrants. That's what we're doing. I have apologised to the Windrush generation, and I do so again. We are doing everything we can to ensure that they are reassured that they do not have the anxiety that some of the generation have had. But we also owe it to them and to the British people to ensure we deal with people who are here illegally.
Dr. Julian Lewis.
Does my right honourable friend still subscribe to her excellent maxim that no deal is better than a bad deal? And does she acknowledge that locking ourselves into a customs union with the EU after Brexit would be a very bad deal indeed?
Well, Well, I'm very happy to confirm what I've always said. No deal is better than a bad deal. As regards a customs union, being in a customs union means we would not be able to negotiate our own trade deals around the rest of the world, and that's exactly what we want to do, is to be able to do that. And as I saw last week with the Commonwealth heads of government, there's considerable interest around the rest of the world in being able to have those independent trade deals negotiated between other countries and the UK.
David Lammy.
In 2011, I wrote to her then Immigration Minister, the member for Ashford, about my constituent who came here in 1956, aged 4, and in 2011 was told that he could no longer work and he did not have British citizenship. Her minister wrote to me and basically said tough. Can she now explain in a little more detail what compensation will be available for my constituent who has been unable to work since 2011 for 7 years? And will she also, importantly, for many people who are feeling vulnerable and scared, assure them that if they ring her hotline, they will see no enforcement action to remove them from the country because they are scared when ringing that hotline?
Can I say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, as I said earlier, obviously individual cases will have different circumstances, but my Right Honourable friend, the Home Secretary, will be setting out the compensation scheme, and she will do that shortly. Can I also say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, on the second point that he raised, my Right Honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has made this clear on a number of occasions. The hotline is there to help people to be able to get the documents they need, to be able to clarify their status, such that they don't suffer from the problems that the constituent of the Right Honourable Gentleman has suffered from in the past. She has also made it clear that there is no question of taking enforcement action when people ring that hotline. We actively want people to be ringing that hotline, to be bringing their cases forward so that the Home Office can help them to ensure that they've got the documents needed so that they can be reassured and will not see any problems in the future.
Let's hear from a Baron. John Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend for a very positive meeting about the need for NHS England to release all of the £200 million cancer transformation funding to frontline services so they can better deliver on the cancer strategy. However, since then, the system has been painfully slow in following through on what was agreed at that meeting. If this continues, will the Prime Minister meet with me so that we can unblock this logjam on behalf of cancer patients and their families?
I say to my honourable friend that I'm sorry to hear that there has still been some slowness in the system in relating to that. I will look into this matter, and I'm quite happy, if necessary, if we're not able to unblock it, to meet him again.
Thank you. Order. Point of order. Yes, very well. Let's hear it. Liz Saville-Roberts.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Gareth. For the first time since the birth of devolution, the Westminster Government succeeded.
People are leaving the chamber. We'll just pause for a moment. I wouldn't want the gravamen of the Honourable Lady's inquiry to go unheard or inadequately heard. The people toddling out of the chamber could do so quickly and quietly. That would be much appreciated by the Honourable Lady and doubtless by others. Yes, a bit of projection and I think we'll hear the Honourable Member. Point of order, Liz Saville-Roberts.
I greatly thank the Speaker for his support for my point of order. For the first time since the birth of devolution, the Westminster Government has succeeded in clawing back powers which should be held by our National Assembly. This will have major consequences for the UK's constitution, and this is all thanks to the Labour Party in Wales. Despite the profound significance of this backroom deal, it's being raised by the UK Government through written statement only. Could the Speaker please advise me how best to request an oral statement in the Chamber, and to whom should I direct such a request?
Well, my interpretation of what the Honourable Lady has just said is that she said, I don't like just having to content myself with a written statement, I want an oral. And Mr. Speaker, can I register my point? And the truth of the matter is the honourable lady is very well aware that is precisely what she has just done to considerable, well, I say to considerable effect in the sense that it's been heard. Whether there will now be an oral statement, I don't know, but events take place and matters evolve, and if in subsequent days she is not satisfied, she can always seek, if she thinks the matter warrants the urgent attention of the House, to persuade me that it does, and I will have to judge on a case-by-case basis. But for today, she's done her best. Thank you. Point of order, Pete Wishart.
I'm very grateful to you, Mr. Speaker. It's actually worse than that. These issues and matters are being determined in the unelected House of Lords, where democratically elected members of Parliament will have no say in the outcomes of these conclusions. Is there anything that we can do to wrest back control to ensure that it's democratically elected members of Parliament that determine and decide these very important issues?
The short answer to the honourable gentleman is I think that we can await the return of the Lord's amendments, and then this chamber can come to a view about those amendments, and I rather imagine that it will do so. But the honourable gentleman has very properly ventilated his concern, and I hope that it will have been heard on the Treasury bench as well as it has been by me and by other honourable members. Point of order, Mr. Damien Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable gentleman from Tottenham has just mentioned me by name and in a critical manner for an action I apparently took as a minister some years ago. I have no memory of the individual action, but I would like to confirm that I was given no advance notice that he was going to mention me by name. And could I have your confirmation that that is behaviour that in this chamber that you would deprecate?
Well, I have just received advice on the matter as the right honourable gentleman was raising his point of order, and my response is as follows. First of all, I didn't interpret what the right honourable gentleman said as being an accusation of dishonourable conduct. It was critical, but it wasn't an accusation of dishonourable conduct or the absence of integrity. Point one. And secondly, I think that the criticism was, and this is related to my first point, of the right honourable gentleman in his capacity as a minister and the discharge of the duties that he held at that time. I don't think it was a criticism of the right honourable gentleman as a member of the House. Look, I think what I would say to the right honourable gentleman is that in the name of the smooth running of this place, it is ordinarily desirable that members should be as candid with each other as possible. And I would go so far as to say that it would have done no harm for the right honourable gentleman to have been informed. But I am guided by procedural experts, and the clerk is our most distinguished procedural expert. And in narrow terms, was the right honourable gentleman guilty of an impropriety in that sense, the right honourable gentleman member for Tottenham? No, he wasn't. But that is, I think, the balanced and fair answer that I should give, and I have given, to the right honourable gentleman. Member for... Yes, I thought that the honourable gentleman behind him was shifting in his seat as though he was about to raise a point of order, but obviously not. No, the point of order appetite has been satisfied, at least for now, and that is very reassuring. We come now to the 10-minute rule motion for which the honourable member for Liverpool-Wavertree has been patiently waiting. 10-minute rule motion, Luciana Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require public authorities to have regard to the need to consider physical and mental health impacts in the exercise of their functions and for connected purposes. This bill is designed to bring a health in all policies approach to the making and delivery of all central and local government policies, and it has a simple aim: to improve the physical and mental health of our nation for generations to come. The Roman statesman Cicero said, "The health of the people shall be the supreme law." And down the centuries, when governments have heeded his advice, they have performed great deeds, building great sewers and providing fresh water, cleaning up our food by banning contaminants, clearing slums and giving children safe spaces to play, cleansing our city air, vaccinating our children against killer diseases, banning smoking in public places, bringing health and safety, protecting pedestrians against the dangers of traffic, and introducing seatbelts. And of course, the creation of our National Health Service, delivering physical and mental health care at the point of need, irrespective of the ability to pay. But we cannot rest on our laurels, Mr. Speaker. New challenges arise in each generation. New threats to our health and well-being. New responses are required. And that is what my bill is all about. Honourable members will have heard me speak about the mental health crisis we face in this country. This is not the only health crisis we face as a nation. We face a crisis of social care. We have a system which disproportionately focuses on treating people when they are in a crisis or really sick, rather than keeping our population well. We face an epidemic of loneliness, young as well as old. Tobacco remains a toxic killer. Too many cities and towns are blighted by substance misuse. A generation of children is facing obesity into adulthood. The technological revolution has an impact on our mental health and levels of physical activity. Cancer touches every family in Britain. Increasingly, our NHS is contending with lifestyle-related diseases. And for me, the worst aspect of these major health challenges is the inequality in the ways that they impact on people. This really is a social justice issue. Despite all the advances in our nation's health over the centuries, poor people suffer poorer health and live shorter lives than affluent people. Income is a determinant of health, and what a terrible indictment on our society. According to the Department of Health's latest annual report, the health gap between rich and poor is widening. In 2010, life expectancy for men in England's most deprived areas was 9.1 years less than those in the richest areas. By 2015, the figure had risen to 9.2 years, and the equivalent gap for women also grew from 6.8 to 7.1 years. And poorer people are more likely to spend 20 more years in ill health. They're more likely to suffer from stroke, cancer and heart attacks. Poorer people have less chance of gaining access to a